Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's installment of For Real, For Real. Today, we're going to be talking about, really progressivism and this moment in this country. But at the end of the day, listen, the squad is winning. And if you don't know who the squad is, we hope that you know by the end of this conversation. And I'm concerned if you didn't know them. Lucy, any opening words?
No, that's it. Let's get into it because we have so much to get into.
Yes. Okay. So if you have been living under a rock, you may not know that there are a group of progressive women congresswomen. Progressive congresswomen who received some media attention and also popular support dating back to the 2018 election, and have really been outspoken and shown up for the communities that they represent, and also just marginalized communities in general in a really empowering, inspiring way. The members of the squad are Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. See, I was like, I was like, I don't want to call her AOC, but whatever. She has a name. She's a human. So Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, and our low-key fave, Ilhan Omar.
Yes, because if anti-Blackness didn't work the way that it worked, a particular person who was of that squad wouldn't be seen as the Beyonce of the group. Which is why it took me a really long time for quote unquote AOC to grow on me, because I just think that people are always looking to worship at the altar of a thin white woman who could wear a bold red lip. And my controversial hot take, I actually think she was a liberal with a little bit of moho when she first ran and she entered. I feel as if from her talking points, I saw her go from an edgy liberal to progressivism to now someone who is progressive and willing to flirt with leftist politics. But I'll keep the rest to myself.
You already went there. I mean, my introduction to the squad was AOC because I knew a bunch of folks who had worked with her and was asked to donate to her campaign. As a born and bred Queens native, I was like, yes, sign me up. We need to get rid of this old white man who doesn't even live in the district and does not represent either the Bronx nor the Queens sections of that district. And really, after the 2016 election, so I went into the 2018 election cycle a fan of AOC and preaching about her, and then just seeing a lot of my immigrant rights fam really supporting and lifting up Ilhan. I'm not Ilhan. Lifting up. I mean, yeah. I think they kind of did, but not as much. Really more Rashida Tlaib out of Michigan and Unite Michigan or Michigan Unites. I'm blanking on the name of the organization right now. I'm so sorry. But knowing that she really came out of that community stood out to me as well, and always down to support the Palestinian fam. So those were the two people that were on my radar. And then Ayanna Pressley, just because, when folks find a dope Black woman doing the thing, they send her to me, and I'm all for it. I stand always. And so, and I was also a fan of her braids. So, there was a slow evolution. And I think that the part for me that was really exciting to not only see them win their elections, but to not bend to conform to this century plus old institution that was not built for them or not built for us, was the fact that there was a level of accessibility that all four of them embodied, which I think is so aligned with my vision of what liberation looks like, right? So in terms of governing for the people, by the people. So that's the little quick intro to the squad, and they represent diverse. So they represent Minneapolis, Detroit, New York, and Boston. And I think also it's interesting that none of them are from California, which has been the progressive bastion of, the future of the Democratic Party.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, and that lo and behold, they're not from the left coast. They're actually from the Midwest and the Northeast. And what does that mean for the future of this country? And also dispelling the myth of who is left, who is progressive, because they're also not white. And they're not Latinx. So that also was a particular thing that I guess AOC is Latinx. Sorry, I did that. But
is she white?
And yes, that was the previous episode for that conversation. But just generally in thinking of progressivism, even just my progressive journey, very much a very particular kind of person comes to mind when you think of like, oh, I'm a progressive, and they don't look like the nebulous hymn that comes to mind when I think of that.
Right, because these folks represent those of us who actually, they live in the United States that I live in, right? I don't live in a United States that looks like Maine or Vermont, right? Which, no shade, like they are part of the union. However, that is a very particular kind of understanding. And like the left coast or whatever, I just think they represent immigrant communities, first generation, refugees. Like these are all people that I know in my parents are refugees. I am first generation. Especially what I really found endearing about AOC was just like, this was a person who working class in a very specific kind of way, like being a waitress, this, that, and a third. And so I am not about the cult of personality. However, I love how these four are able to wield and weaponize the cult of personality against mainstream media to get us to have the conversation around progressivism. So that is where I'm at. I appreciate the fact that especially AOC, they are very much of their generation, and they are savvy. They know how to use social media in a very specific kind of way. And I recently heard AOC on the Daily last week or this week, can't remember, but like, this is a person who truly understands the landscape that she is in and what needs to happen if we are going to win. Because the moral of the story is what we saw this past election: progressivism wins. Progressive ideas are popular among people across race, class, ethnicity, and educational attainment. People like smart, progressive ideas and ideologies. However, the Democratic Party has a very serious internal divide because centrists think there is something nefarious. They treat progressive ideology and people who assert progressivism almost as if it's nefarious, and we're the enemy and we're up to no good. And so I just want to start by saying right here, this is my hot take. If you liken and fashion yourself as an anti-racist, centrism is literally in service to white supremacy. Because what centrism is proposing is that there is a both sides to inequality, there is a both sides to subjugation, and there is a both sides to oppression. If you are anti-racist, you will have to do the hard, laborious work of asking yourself, if you are centrist, how can you become either more progressive, either more left? Because if you're anti-racist, I feel like there's only three quadrants you can be in: left, progressive, or anarchist. You have to be in some way, shape, or form flirting with, thinking with those ideas, because we're not gonna undo anti-Blackness and anti-indigeneity through centrism. Mm-hmm. We're not. And I understand that some people that's gonna land on your body really loudly. It's gonna thump. It might bruise you a little bit, but like, real talk, fam, like we're talking about disrupting premature death. You're not gonna disrupt premature death negotiating with white supremacist terrorists.
And I think when we think about what progressive ideals are, particularly those that resonate and are the most successful, that have been reflected in this past election cycle, are promises to change people's material conditions, right? So you're literally improving the quality of life, the air we breathe, the food we eat, the ability to have shelter, the ability to have economic mobility. That is what wins. And centrism doesn't give you that, right? Centrism is what gives you a, I'm going to say it, flawed ACA instead of a public option, while we are now in the midst of a pandemic and millions of people still do not have health care. A lot of even COVID testing is not covered by health insurance. Like, this whole fealty to health insurance, private health insurance, is centrism, right? And even having a public option, which is where we're now at, is not Medicare for all, right? It is, you have the option to opt into this thing versus approaching healthcare as a human right, right? And so I think that if we look at 2020, and really, I would say the last 4 years, but really the last decade, when we look at the economic disparities, the disparities in health outcomes, in educational outcomes, in employment, in savings, the amount of people that are working poor, so folks that are working in excess of 40 hours a week, that are working multiple minimum wage jobs, or even are making, $40,000 or whatever whatever the base salary is for entry-level positions, and really struggling to be able to find housing, really struggling to be able to afford transportation, whether they have a car or they don't, being able to not just attain housing, number one, but to attain housing that's safe, not just an external environment, so what's happening in your neighborhood, but also internally, whether the conditions within your house are safe, whether it's clean water and lead-free paint, and all of the things. So I think that we have, I am turning 32, and I think of the Occupy movement. I think of the financial downturn in 2007, which has basically ruined my generation, like my whole class. Anybody who graduated in those 4 years, like, our starting point was horrible in terms of being able to get a job, regardless of how qualified you may be, starting salaries being crap. And fast forward to 2020, we are now in the same situation of folks who graduated in 2019. We can't, as folks like to revise history, and revisionism is definitely a trend and tool of white supremacy as well.
Hello.
Like, that all of a sudden it's COVID is what has created this world, and it's really not. COVID has just cracked open all of the fissures that were already existing. And so when we think about what is really radicalizing people, it is their lived experience and their material conditions. And so I also want to say, like, COVID-19 has radicalized people in a way that has been really fascinating from, like, a social scientist perspective to watch and be part of and to document. But people forget that really centrism is what's got us Donald Trump.
Ooh.
Hillary Clinton
tell me more.
was a centrist candidate. Everybody, well, yes, except for Bernie. So you had O'Malley and Clinton, who were centrist candidates, and you had Bernie. And again, people were forced to do this calculus of, are people going to vote for Donald Trump? Or are we going to make the pragmatic choice of voting for the safe candidate that of course anybody would vote for? And what ends up happening is a candidate that was uninspiring to most people, who, I say, in comparison to 2020, the people who stayed home, who were not galvanized by centrism in 2020, in 2016, we're galvanized in 2020 because we are facing an existential threat. It is not because we are doubling down on centrism. Okay? I just want to make that really clear.
Okay, and let's also make really clear when we talk about 2016, we cannot forget that our elections were interfered with. I know people don't want to talk about that. Yes. I don't know why that is considered like conspiracy theory. Fam. We were the same way we interfered in other people's elections. Our elections were very much interfered with. And at the very least, maybe people didn't quote unquote hack into and change votes, but the disinformation campaigns, the misinformation campaigns were very well executed. And so we also have to think about that. And so so centrism got us here, and we're constantly being asked to understand centrists. We're constantly being asked to
compromise,
to negotiate with centrists, to compromise, but centrists are never expected to move. And so to me, it's just like only people with a very particular kind of class. To me, centrism is very much tied into a class identity. That's just a certain level of class solidarity that crosses race, that crosses ethnicity, because centrists are not just white. And so, but for those of us who have read, right, because Clyburn, no shade, but brother gotta get up out of here. He is no longer the leader for this moment. And so, yes, that does not take away from his civil rights background, but right now, this moment does not call for centrism in a very specific kind of way. Black people have been negotiating. First of all, Black people, Indigenous people, we always come to the negotiating table. Period. And yet we keep being whittled down. And I just think where we are right now, we're like, actually, you're not going to send me an invitation to the negotiation table. I'm actually going to send you an invitation to the negotiation table. And for me, for the Pelosi's, the Clyburns, like, especially Clyburn, like, you should be happy that we have improved upon your legacy. And so, yeah, we can't do things the way y'all did. And that's not disrespect. That's not ageism. It's just like, how can you in good faith as a Black person continue to ask Black people to give away everything for what? For a little bit of compromise? Nah, man. That is.
And the thing is that there is this misconception that centrism is compromise in big tent. No, actually, centrism is the status quo. It is not a compromise. And actually, progressivism is the compromise, because what we're asking for is incremental change over radical change, so y'all can get comfortable and get used to it and get on board. So I think we also need to take ownership of this narrative that somehow it's radical to be progressive. It is not. By definition, literally the word is progress in it. So that's real talk. So how do we debunk that it's radical to be progressive? Because again, for a lot of people, you're looking at Ayanna, you're looking at Rashida, you're looking at Elon. People are like, actually, them people do look radical to me. And then that's because they're not white. First of all, let's talk about that though. Centrism is very much rooted in. But let's talk about Katie Porter. Katie Porter, which in theory could be a member of the squad, her politics align. She flipped a red district. What is the difference between Katie Porter, and the squad?
Well, because actually, theoretically, she if the squad were a district, Katie Porter house is in the district,
right?
Because Mama understands a viral moment. Mama knows exactly how to create a viral moment, and she knows how to make money off of those viral moments. And again, she is very clear, always breaking down. So to me, it's just like, okay, the moral of the story is, how come there are more members of the squad winning or squad adjacent people? Because maybe those people don't see themselves as a member of the squad in a very particular kind of way. But how come those people progressive candidates won all of their seats and centrists lost, especially here in South Florida. Pelosi Democrats
lost
their seats. They're not going. So they're not. So what do we make of that? What do we make of that? Because what do we make of that?
I mean, I think, so there was a chart on Twitter, which I will not screen share because I'm trying to find the source, but because, you got to fact check, right? But I did do some additional research, and there was a grid of 15 Democrats, and those who, and they would say, if you supported Medicare for all, if you won, and then the percentage of the leaning. So if you were like, it's a Democratic leaning district or Republican leaning district, and like, it'll be like +1%, +2%, whatever it is. Great graphic, which I'll totally drop in the chat later. And every single progressive candidate, so a candidate, the barometer of progressivism in this case being they publicly supported Medicare for all or were a co-sponsor, and they all won. And every candidate who did not support Medicare for all lost, regardless of if that district was Dem leaning or not. So you cannot go and say that, oh, well, these ideas are too radical for Republican leaning districts, because in reality, centrists lost Democratic districts because they're not on board. And to say that, like, again, it is not radical in the middle of a global pandemic, which we have not seen in 100 years, that we should have guaranteed health care for the US population.
Right. And being that we are a
radical moment, and actually I'm a side-eye anybody who does not agree with that. And you deserve to lose because your constituents are dying of COVID-19 right now.
Okay, so here's the thing. The Connor Lambs of the world, the everybody of the world who be like, well, defund the police, fracking, those are too radical, and that's gonna make me lose. That's gonna make me lose my seat. And so to that I say, actually, no one's entitled to. I don't think anyone's entitled to your seat, even if you're Democrat. So that's probably a controversial hot take. You're not like. Yeah, like you have to work for it. And if the people are moving to the left and you're moving to the right, I don't think you should represent those people, right? And even knowing how nefarious and how ridiculous the Republicans are. But here's my thing. If we are the party of science, we cannot pick and choose when we want to use science. Science tells us that climate disaster is real. Therefore, if climate disaster is real, we have got to be honest about the fact that fracking must eventually come to an end if we want to live on this planet. Now, the awful thing about being a human is that it's a group project. This human wants to stay alive, wants to have a planet for her nieces and nephews to be on. Those people in Western Pennsylvania, this, that, and the third, they only care about their really nice hourly wage and their good money. And maybe they don't care that there's not going to be a planet. But we need, as a Democratic Party, not even as a Democratic Party, as United Stasians, it cannot be considered a hot take to say we got to reevaluate our relationship to fracking. By that, I mean, stop it. Like full sell, wholesale. And number two, for those of us whose family has gotten caught up in the criminal injustice system, mass incarceration, you name it, I don't know how you're going to reform that.
And so, I think that's, I think that in reclaiming the narrative and busting some myths, like ultimately progressivism is progressing towards what? And I think there are two very clear things. So one is that the full humanity of Black people, Indigenous people, and immigrant communities brooks no compromise. Like there's no compromising that. There is no centrist position. It's either I get to be a full human being in this country or I do not get to be. And I think the same thing goes for our environment. Like we need, our environment is required for human survival. there is no compromise. It's either we want the human species to survive or we do not. And we are at an existential crisis for both of those, at both of those points. So which side are you on? Because it is not a radical concept to be able to want to survive.
Right. And so as a feminist who does believe in having a labor politic and understanding, I understand what it means to be like, okay, we have to divest from fracking. I don't necessarily want tomorrow for all of these people to be jobless. The same way I don't want police officers to become jobless tomorrow. But can you earn your living in a way that does not create more premature death and that does not exacerbate the death of the planet? So I actually wanted to problem solve and think about these people in these very specific kind of industries. How can we switch them over to a more humane industry and they still get their money? Because I don't want anybody to be jobless. And that's another thing we want to be clear about. We already have a joblessness problem in this United States. I'm not trying to create that. However, the way you make money cannot produce death, and then you expect us not to have an opinion about it or not to protest against it. Like, this is literally where we are when we're thinking about the planet and when Black people are thinking about themselves in a very specific kind of way. And second to Black people, the second group of people, and if we're talking about Canada, it would be them. Like, Indigenous people are also killed at a very high rate by the police, very high rate. So it's just like, these are two groups of people who are really thinking about our survival and our futurity in a very specific kind of way. Policing is not part of that future, because policing is always stopping us from living our full lives. So the reason why it's so easy for people with racial privilege and class privilege to be centrist, because they always have something they can lean back on. If you can't lean on the whiteness, you can lean on the money. And if you got the jackpot, you can lean on both. But for those of us who don't have immense class privilege in that kind of a way, and who don't have racial privilege, or even if we do, we're choosing not to use it in that very specific nefarious kind of way. Like, why is wanting to live on this planet, why is wanting to live equitably and in justice and in right relationship with fellow citizens and the planet, why is that considered divisive? Right. So when I heard Connor Lamb the other day on the Daily, 36-year-old man, veteran, this, that, and a third, he is a good example on, like, he both recognizes that systemic racism is a thing, and he's also upholding racism. Like, and so this is the conundrum of the centrists. This is what centrism constantly puts you in a pickle, where you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. And I don't even think the Connor Lambs of the world are even understand how they're talking out of both sides of their mouth and how they're trying to serve two masters. You either for progressivism or you for white supremacy. You cannot serve two masters in that degree, which is why, in that regard, which is why I guess the AOCs, the Ayanna Presleys, the Rashida Tlaibs, and the Ilhan Omars look so like whatever, because they're so clear. And I just think centrism is rooted in wishy-washiness, and wishy-washiness is why this country is in the mess that it's in, which is why there are 50 different responses to one problem of COVID. It's the wishy-washiness.
Because nobody wants to offend, alarm, disaffect anyone when it's a cut and dry issue. And so I think that this election really, so at the top of the ticket, there's a quote unquote unifying distaste for a particular person, but down ballot, you got to really decide, like, what type of future do you want to see? Because the choices were very stark. And I just say that the presidential election was in a special box because there's just so much at work there. And so one of the reasons why we chose this topic is because for the past 10 days, there has been an onslaught of thought pieces and Twitter hot takes and all of this quote, pushing the narrative of infighting, because God forbid this group of women actually push back and say, actually, I'm following through on what I ran on and what I told my constituents I was going to stand up for. And actually, don't act like y'all didn't know, because I'm the same me that I was in 2018. Okay. And so what is interesting, so there are a couple of things at play. So one, there are folks that really want to come together. I don't come together with white supremacy. So like, is a
Are you sure?
There's no healing with white supremacy. And I'm gonna say something that may be a hot take that may upset people. How has that worked for South Africa? Because they actually had a truth and reconciliation process that was incomplete, and there is much to be desired having been there. Okay, so you don't get to heal with your oppressor, and that really is some work that is not my job. And so and is not the work or requirement of or purpose of oppressed people. And so that is one narrative that is at play, which is why centrists are pushing. And these are the same, I say this because you cannot separate the two narratives, because they're the same messenger. Like the same people that on the one hand are like, well, we have to disavow the radical left and AOC because there are 50% of Republicans who don't believe the election is over. Like, which is insanity to me. And then there is this resentment that this wing of the party, which we can have a whole other discussion on how the Democratic Party is not a container for progressivism, because it has not been a progressive party, will never be, but whatever. And I am no longer a Democrat. We already talked about this, so I'm not gonna say us. There's no us and we, because I left that ship. So the fact that there's a resentment. I just watched The Crown. I binge watched it when it came out, and one of the things that you see about Princess Diana's treatment through this season is there's a resentment of the popularity and the connection and authenticity this one person has for an aging, decaying, really horrible institution. And I like to parallel that to this group of vibrant women who are able to make a human connection with their constituents and the larger American public and people outside of the United States, and while functioning in this decaying, archaic institution. So my little popular reference. So there is this resentment. I know that whatever we can talk about and I am anti-colonial, but this we're also just seeing this like resentment borne out, because y'all know y'all are irrelevant. Y'all have had decades to do this. This is me in my full millennial glory. Like whatever y'all are offering ain't it. It hasn't served us. This is why we're in this place and we're at this moment in time. And nothing that you're selling is appealing. So I would say that a part of the critique is who the messengers are, and the fact that the progressive wing of the party is the one that actually turns out voters. Because again, when left to centrist, what do we have?
Yeah, so I just want to make it really clear. I just think the Pelosi's, the Clyburns, the Connor Lambs, and them other people, I think the Democratic Party is really their party, because the Democratic Party has always been centrist. I think because there's truly not a truly unified leftist movement in the United States.
As compared
to other countries. And the reason that is because we are forced to be housed within this very centrist party. So I'm of two minds. Either the centrists go over to the Republicans, because I really think that's what they are. I really think they're a Republican light, and that's probably going to be very controversial for a lot of you who are watching. And then, I
say own it.
or if those of us who are actually left, like for real left, are going to have to think about how we break away from this thing. And I think because we're also afraid of third parties never go anywhere in these United States, I think that's why you see the infighting, because someone does have to win. Because if we're going to be a nation state that like is not going to move away from a two-party system, then we have to find a way to like put all the centrists in the basement so that the rest of us can move forward. And at the same time, we have to think about how do we build out an anti-racist coalition. So we have so many things to do. How do we remain clear in our progressivism? How do we push the party left? And how do we build out our anti-racist, anti-fascist coalition? Because 71 million people did vote for a fascist. And those people are not going anywhere. So thinking about as we, is there a possibility to push the Pelosi's and the Clyburns and to make them left?
No.
Is that a possibility? Damn. Why? Okay, tell me more.
Because that doesn't benefit them.
Oh shit. Okay, how so?
At all. Like,
say more. It
doesn't benefit them in terms of their leadership positions that they would have to give up. It doesn't benefit them economically. It literally does. It is not the reason why they are there. And today we had an election, like literally party leadership was just reelected into the same thing. And it's so like,
why is that? Why do I have to suffer with Pelosi? And I'm not saying Pelosi didn't do her job under Obama.
She's a really effective Speaker of the House.
But I don't think I don't think she can meet this moment. I really don't think she can meet this moment. Can she meet this moment?
I would beg to differ that she can meet the moment of a Biden administration. She cannot meet the moment of the majority of the American people wanting something different.
But so here's the thing:
she will be an effective bearer, an effective standard bearer for Joe Biden in the House. I do not think she will be an effective standard bearer for the American people who actually do not want the status quo and are expecting transformational change.
Yeah, because she poo-pooed and disrespected the impeachment process. She, in a lot of ways, sabotaged it. She made it more narrow. She was just like, she was like, let's not waste our time. We could have done something with Barr. And it's just like, yeah, I'm not saying these people, Barr, we would have impeached Barr or anything, but that there are things that needed to be happening. And it just doesn't seem like Pelosi is interested in accountability and is interested in doing what the blue wave, we have very specific demands, and Pelosi refuses to respond to those demands. Like, what's up with that?
I mean, she actively
want to turn her into a meme. Go ahead.
I mean, she actively primaried progressive members, and then wondered why
she's evil, man. She gotta go. Nancy Pelosi. I know she just got her job again, but Nancy Pelosi, in my humble opinion, it's just she's not a friend. She's not our friend. And when she made that man. Nancy Pelosi has got to go. The Nancy Pelosi's of the Democratic Party are like the paternalism, the racism, and it's the same heifer who wants to wear a kente cloth and want to take a knee. Girl,
please don't tell me about that Wakanda moment. I'm so
girl. Oh my God. Like she is the white moderate that MLK wrote about. In my opinion, Pelosi as a quote unquote, how is it possible that I'm in the same party with Nancy Pelosi? How? Like, I don't know. Like, get me out of here, Jesus. Get me out of here. Like, so,
I say, so number one, big ups to the Working Families Party that is doing the work in building a multiracial anti-racist coalition. So it's not to say that there are not people out here doing the work that are not reflective of America, that we are so I mean, there's so many reasons why we're in this moment, because American voters are aspirational voters versus like you vote as the kind of person that you want to be, not the person that you are right now. That is fascinating. I mean, it is also a particular white voter phenomenon, but there are, I mean, but it is not like that is how we get the Kanye's and the Lil Waynes as well. We are a country that is right of center. And so it skews our understanding of what is actually left and right, and what is actually compromise, and what is actually moderation, and what is actually center. So when you have, how do I say, you have, I'm trying to think of like a good example. Okay, so like there is Joe Manchin that is literally a Republican. There's like Nancy Pelosi that is center right, and then the Senate Minority Leader, who I'm blanking on his name, Schumer,
Mm-hmm.
which I voted against him when I was living in New York. Anyway, so like Chuck Schumer, they're both center right, and then you have folks if we were really honest, like most members of the squad are not leftists, right? Like they are left of center, but they are not actually left. So when we talk about radicals, like they're like, words have meaning. I think.
Can you imagine? Like AOC is not radical, fam. Like,
no,
she's cute. I get it. She's cute to a lot of people if that's what you go for. But it's just like the things that come out her mouth, radical, nah, fam. Maybe this time around, it sounds like she's been spending more time with organizers and not activists, and that's and we could. There's a big difference between organizers and activists. I think when her campaigning with Bernie and like whatever, that pushed her a little bit more left. I'm telling you, when that girl was first running, Mama was liberal with some salt. Liberal with some earpieces. She was not whatever. So I actually think it's just like, it's criminal for those of us with actual leftist politics, with actual abolitionist politics. It's sad and it's criminal how people get how we
well, I mean, and it goes back to the misinformation and disinformation, which did show itself in 2020. Just in a different kind of way.
Tell me more. How?
So I think this concept of the radical left that was literally nowhere on the ballot. I'm sorry, fam. There was nobody radical left on any ballot in the United States.
Absolutely
So,
not.
like,
absolutely not.
Like that was a major misinformation campaign, thinking that like the choices that you had were the gulag, or apple pie and the bald eagle, or whatever American Eagle thingy. Like it really was not. And also just thinking that like, okay, I'm gonna say some things, and I'm gonna be really brutally honest. And I've been wanting to say.
Give it to me, Chris. Give it to me. I'm putting on my seatbelt. Give it to me, girl.
Defunding the police is not a radical concept. It is actually the compromise. That is the moderation. Y'all can understand defund when it comes to public schools, when it comes to Planned Parenthood. Both of those institutions still exist, right? Okay. So if we want to be really, really clear about the messaging wars, like, it aggravates me. When I say aggravates me, it makes my blood boil. Okay. Well, really, we're losing this PR war on, we can't get suburban white women to be on board with defund because they're scared of, having Section 8 housing in their neighborhood. Like, I don't care about those voters. I'm sorry. I am not for you. And that is not the America that I am trying to build, where you are at the center of who I need to convince. And to say that, like, it is literally defunding police versus abolishing police was the compromise. So, like, when we say so on the one hand, on the right, we have increasing police funding, and you will notice, do a little Rolodex in your mind of the people who are literally calling for increased police funding and training, which we did that after Trayvon. Like, we've done that already for the past 5 years.
And shout out to the grifter as no ethical as DEI consultants who allow themselves to to be drafted into that foolishness.
So liberation does not look like giving any more money to the police for anything. I don't care if it's for shoes. I don't care if it's for a flashlight. I don't care if it's for
we trying to shrink the budget, not make it fatter.
Shrink the budget. Okay. And then there is defund, which is about reducing. So let's break down the word. D means remove. Fund is funding. So defund means remove funding. So if we are going to decrease the funding of an institution, then that means we're going to what? Shrink the budget. And what are we going to do? We're going to take money, that money that we have removed from this line item, because again, we're talking about budgets, and put it someplace else that is going to be more impactful and actually serve communities. So you want to take money that was about protecting and serving communities to actually protect and serve communities with other tools. So there's that, which is the middle, okay? And then the left is abolished, as in you no longer exist.
Hello.
So when we talk about
abolish,
progressivism and right and left, and that is a perfect example of how our concept of what is progressive, what is left, and what is right are totally different, right? So in actuality, centrists are at let's increase police funding, which you see is, sorry, y'all can't see on screen, my hand is going all the way over here, but like increasing police funding and training is right. Defund, reducing their funding is center in this United States context, and abolish is left. So where do you fall on that spectrum? And y'all should be somewhere between defund and abolish, not all the way right over here. And so there's so much work to do. And I get that, like, for a persuasive politics requires you to be able to meet people where they're at and talk in a language that people can understand. And so I do agree that yes, if you need, and the thing is that political education will always be required. I'm sorry. Always. If somebody sees a bumper sticker and decides, yes, that's for me, I'm going to have a little bit more questions, because are you willing to, like, what are you willing to put on the line for a bumper sticker versus what are you willing to put on the line for something that you have a very rooted politic around? And so just like I had to deal with 5 years of people arguing with the word matter in Black Lives Matter, like, we're in the same place with the word defund police. Like, it is, you know what? If your biggest problem in life is that you're uncomfortable with the word defund and you don't understand it, then clearly you don't care about Black liberation or Black lives, or really the lives of anyone, because statistically the police kill lots of people. But anyway.
And this is why I never want us to move away from centrism. Is about a solidarity to a class politic. And when you have a solidarity, and when you have a very particular kind of class understanding of yourself and where you want to stay, you will align yourself and compromise with a whole host of people if it ensures your class standing does not change, which is why we saw Ice Cube, Lil Wayne, this, that, and the third, because these are people who, yes, these are Black men. Yes, these are Black men who've made songs and had made entire careers antagonizing the police and talking about racism in very specific kind of ways. But now that they are solidly part of a wealthy class, they want to hold on to that wealth in a very specific kind of way, which allows them to play this both siderism. So they might not be all the way Republican, but they will get in bed with Republicans if that means their bag will be secured. And so to me, this is why I started the conversation by saying centrism is rooted in white supremacy. Lots of different people uphold white supremacy. Just because someone is a Black centrist, a brown centrist, a South Asian centrist, a queer and trans centrist, does not mean they are not showing up to be in service to white supremacy. To be left, to be progressive, is to move towards taking seriously what it means to build an anti-racist coalition and to bring about anti-racist legislation, period. I usually try to stay away from binarism, But this is where the rubber meets the road. If you're always willing to negotiate with white supremacist terrorists, that's because they're not terrorizing you in a very specific kind of way. And our politics cannot always be me-centered. So Alexis Pauline Gumbs recently said this on a podcast, like, I'm a Black feminist. I think, like, I'm a Black feminist. I'm always thinking about the collective, something to that degree that I'm not an individual. I'm a Black feminist. I think that's what she said. So to me, that's what I'm always thinking about. Like, yeah, here I am, a fourth year doctoral student. Here I am, whatever. Like, my class status, my educational status is starting to change. It's putting me in different situations and whatever. I can foresee in the next 3, 5, 10 years, things are going to be radically different. And I hope you'll be one of the people who keep me grounded, that I don't betray my politics because of that. Just because my class status changed, just because I'm starting to move in rooms with more power and I'm rubbing elbows with more decision makers, that does not mean I'm going to forget my struggle and forget my people and all of a sudden tell lies. All of a sudden make it seem like this is not as bad as it is. Yes, it is as bad as it is. That is why some of us are articulating defund and abolish, because it really is that bad. I personally, Lucy Bisagu, am for abolishing the police. That is my hot take. We're not going to reform anything. And and reformist ideals and ideology is antithetical to change, is antithetical to liberation. We have got to complicate our understanding of rights. Yes, there is a right to, but what about freedom from? We got freedom for. Like we have to start. It's not just negative. We have to be thinking about rights in a negative and a positive sense, and freedom from a negative and a positive sense. Like, what are we fighting for? And so, like, to me, it's just like, it's truly sad state of affairs in these United States when AOC is considered the most radical thing. Like I have been in organizing spaces with people whose capacity to imagine and be radical is so much bigger and deeper than that. And I wish I could give people that opportunity to being in liberatory left spaces. Then you'll understand, like, the United States government will never elect someone with those kind of politics. Literally. So trust me, if they made it to the ticket, I don't care who they are. If they made it on the ticket and they won, trust me, they're safe in a lot of ways.
And so one of the things that I want to highlight, and why this conversation and wrestling with this is so important, is that you have millennials and Gen X. Millennials and Gen Z are overwhelmingly becoming or entering into the political arena with no party affiliation. And so if you are invested in a political party, you have to figure out how to be able to engage and attract people below the age of 45. And or you face extinction and irrelevancy. And so this is where either you want to be the container for a multiracial, anti-racist coalition that is on the path to, restoring environmental integrity and the full humanity of non-white people, or you don't want to be that container. And that's up to y'all. So, but either way,
that's a clear mandate. That's clear.
Folks are not going to be blindly loyal to a political party. And don't get it twisted, 2020 election results are because of the issues that were on the ballot, not the people who are on the ballot. And so if you don't deliver, I know plenty of people who are 19, who are 18, that this is their first election. They are very clear that they will vote you out in 2 years. And they will vote you out in 4 years. And so continue to play these games of, you want to have a public tussle in terms of the soul of the party and the soul of the nation and whatever, and who y'all trying to heal and be in coalition with. But folks whose lives are on the line are watching, and they will act accordingly. And so I just yeah, and let's see if are there any questions in the chat. Going to the live. Like we had a lot to say. Any other thoughts, Lucy?
No other thoughts. You made it really clear. I just think between Gen Z and the really progressive millennials, yeah, extinction is on the horizon for the Pelosi's of the world, the Clyburns of the world. Like this is it. And I honestly think this might be the last election that the Democratic establishment can force a centrist in this very specific kind of a way.
Because the last conversation we had, I was talking about how what we're witnessing and what we're living through is the last grasp of white supremacy. We are seeing that in the Democratic Party. Like for me,
Agreed.
I read this entire battle around the last grasp of white supremacy, because the Democratic Party wants to be the party of people of color in the future while operating under the same leadership and the same structures and the same top-down party leadership and the ideas and modus operandi of the last century. We are in 2020. I don't know if the Democratic Party is going to exist in 3020.
Yeah, and what people need to understand too with Gen Zs and the left and the whatever, you can't come every 4 years and try to weaponize voting against us in a very specific kind of way when you don't listen to us. So I always say this, I put my faith in social movements. You ain't gotta vote for social movements. And so I think people need to understand, like, there's going to be more people who are going to be like you. And I'm seriously considering doing the same thing, becoming no party affiliation. That's number one. And more people who are just going to be like, forget it. Like, this system doesn't work for me. Therefore, I'm going to opt out of it. And so after you've shamed everyone for not voting, are you finally going to listen to the critiques that the people who don't vote give you? And no one is going to we're not always going to have an existential crisis on the ballot every election. That's not the case. And so it worked this time. So I just think centrists really need to think about it. It's just like, here's your chance, here's your opportunity to really do the hard work. Look, let me tell you something. I used to be a centrist. Nobody caved harder for the Democratic Party than I, Lucy Isugu. I was capital L liberal, okay? I wanted to be a pundit. I wanted to be a pundit on MSNBC. You could not tell me nothing, honey. I was like, yeah. And then, thank goodness, I found me some Black feminism in a very real way. And I started having very particular kind of experiences. And then I started understanding, like, actually, like, the Democratic Party actually ain't anti-racist. It doesn't move in an anti-racist way. It will allow lots of people in, which there's a difference between the door is open, anyone can come in, and this place in space is going to work for everyone. And that's when I was like, oh, I see what's going on here. And then Obama got elected. Ooh, then the first 4 years, I was capital L liberal. And then I just saw he turned into the deporter-in-chief, always talking about Pookie and them. He was up on that respectability politics. And again, come on now. Like, Obama had an anti-Black speech almost every other month. Chiding Black. The same Pookie and them showed up for your ass, stood in long lines, and voted for you. Now Pookie and them ain't good enough. No, don't boo vote. But again, that's Black family. I appreciate them.
Vote, let's be clear. I mean, because here's the thing. When you face an existential crisis, you got to use the tools that you have at your disposal.
Use the tools
in the toolbox, okay? But I will say that